I suppose I should have listened when everyone told me not to buy anything from the haunted antique store, but it wasn't like it was a haunted doll or a haunted car or anything malignant. It was just a haunted beer collection, and what could possibly go wrong with that? I'm glad you asked. As I was setting up the collection for display, carefully and meticulously fronting and facing each one, as if it was still for sale in some Dust Bowl era roadside service station, you could say that as I put it all together and took it all in, it just spoke to me. Literally. Just as I was placing an old, slightly scratched Pabst Blue Ribbon can on the top shelf of the display, a voice drifted out from within and started belittling me for my outdated clothes and lack of vinyl, and I soon became very much aware that this particular haunted beer can collection was haunted by a most peculiar kind of ghost. Naturally, I spoke at length with the ghost about things it insisted I'd probably never heard of, or that I only started liking once everyone else did, and finally I learned that snarky spirit within that can had not always haunted that can. He used to spend his living days haunting the streets of Uptown, milling around that stretch of Hennepin between Lake and Franklin, back when Uptown was still cool. And he'd grown so used to haunting places where he wasn't wanted during life, he'd taken it up in the afterlife as well. And so over the course of a few days' worth of conversations with that tall boy dwelling disembodied voice, I came to accept that this was a haunting of ironic proportions, by a spirit that had been doing things before they were cool, before doing things before they're cool was cool. And over time, he started to intrude upon my lifestyle, moaning and rattling ethereal bike chains all day and night, until I finally caved in and bought the new Vampire Weekend, on vinyl, of course, just to appease him. And once I'd made that small concession, he wanted more. He wanted the clothes. He wanted the cheap beer. He wanted the empty discourse. He wanted all those other things that had been his in life. And while he couldn't personally enjoy the physical pleasures of that life anymore, he could manipulate me into a sort of vicarious vessel through which to relive his glory days on the scene. Now, whenever he wanted something, he simply had to rattle those chains until I caved and did whatever it was. So I ended up going out dressed in paisley scarves and John Lennon shades, drifting from one thrift store to the next in search of just the right pair of corduroys, or hanging around the Fetus and talking about how much better Let It Be was, then waxing nostalgic about the days of hanging around Let It Be and complaining that it wasn't as good as Northern Lights. And everywhere I went, I had to have that haunted PBR can in hand, just so that he could come along and enjoy it. And it was embarrassing and humiliating and actually pretty tedious, when after a while the only other people who would talk to me were dudes much like I imagined he had been when he was alive. Dudes in purple leggings and hot pants, giant thick-framed glasses without lenses, t-shirts with old Atari logos, which, to be honest, if they really wanted to obscure, they would have had a Coleco logo. Or flannel shirts with John Deere hats. It might have been good for the ghost of hipsters past, but it wasn't good for me. So when I'd had enough, I finally stood up to him and I said, "Look, you had your shot at life and you blew it. Now just get out of mine and let me live it. I'm tired of listening to all these bland Joy Division wannabes. I'm sick of hanging out at the most exclusive coffee shops in town. I don't want to shop for any more used records, and I absolutely refuse to keep dressing up like the illegitimate love child of Steven Tyler and Woody Allen." I told him all this stuff is stupid. Now, I've seen some bad trends in my life, but what he was doing to me was like all those bad trends tossed together in a blender. I was like a walking bad taste smoothie, and I wasn't going to take it anymore. And he asked me to go take a look in a mirror, and giving me a good long time to get a look at myself, he told me that it was too late. That I'd been slowly turning into him for too long now, and that the next step had just been taken. For once you start making fun of the things other hipsters do, only then are you yourself poised to become a true hipster. And I argued with him and told him that I am in no way a hipster or anything even close. And he said that only true hipsters go around denying that they're hipsters. And that was the last and final step, and I had just taken it. And I looked him in the eye, or rather looked deep into that beer can and said, "Fine. If making fun of you and refusing to conform to the standards of your so-called non-conformist culture makes me a hipster, then wax my mustache and slap me on a fixie, because I'm not changing." And that was all it took. Once I had actually accepted it, once I was resigned to living the lifestyle into which he forced me, the whole thing just didn't interest him anymore. As if once someone else was into it, it was no longer obscure enough for him, he stopped making me dress and act and consume like some kind of hentai Elton John. and I was able to readopt my more sensible attire once again. And much less gradually than I'd eased myself out of my preferred manner of being, I snapped right back into it and began once again to live life like a normal person. But I still hear him some nights, rattling those bike chains and moaning that tinny, echoey moan from the PBR can where it still sits on display as part of my haunted beer can collection. And I still keep a few obscure bands around, on vinyl, just to shut him up. And sometimes I turn them up real loud, because they help drown out the moaning and the voices coming from that anarchist over in the service camp.